Hello, here's what's coming up on the world today. 3 people killed in Italy as floods from Storm Pigeon ravaged Tuscany. Welcome back. Turning to the war in Ukraine now. Russia has launched a massive drone attack hitting critical infrastructure in the west and south of Ukraine, destroying private houses and commercial buildings in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. Officials say it is unclear the number of casualties. The State Emergency Services of Ukraine released video of firefighters putting out a raging fire there. Kharkiv Regional Governor Oleh Snibobov, writing on Telegram, said the attacks targeted civilian infrastructure after midnight in the city of Ukraine's northeast and also struck a locality in the region. The Air Force said it shot down 24 Shahed drones out of 40 launched by Russia, the biggest drone attack in weeks to target Kharkiv in the northeast, Odessa and Kherson in the south, and the region of Lviv on Ukraine's border with Poland in the west. In the meantime, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is hailing U.S. measures imposed on Thursday against Moscow as what is needed. In his nightly video address, Mr. Zelensky said every sanctions decision must work in full so that there is no chance for Russia to bypass the sanctions. The latest measures target a major entity involved in the development, operation, and ownership of a massive project in Siberia known as Arctic 2 LNG. However, the Kremlin has dismissed the sanctions, saying that Western sanctions on Russia over Ukraine hurt those who imposed them and that it expects more to be introduced in the future. And while economies around the world have come out of their slump, Germany is facing a growing recession. Energy prices are at incredible highs in Europe's biggest economy. Back in October, the International Monetary Fund said Germany was headed for deeper recession. The IMF's chief economist, Pierre Oliver, said that 2 very powerful forces were taking their toll. Germany's strong manufacturing sector is very energy intensive and was previously heavily dependent on energy supplies from Russia that have now dried up. The tightening of monetary policy and a rise in inflation context have also seen a relative weakening of investment. Germany is also facing long-term structural problems such as an aging society and a shortfall of skilled workers. And on this, we're being joined now by Deutsche Welle correspondent Markus Richmond. He joins us from Berlin. Hello, Markus. Talk to us firstly about how big the problems are facing German economy.
Yeah, well, it really isn't looking too good. The International Monetary Fund just recently came out with numbers that show that Germany is the only major economy facing a recession. That means economic growth here is already down and will take a further hit. If you talk to business leaders here, the sentiment is really downbeat. Many companies are cutting their investment plans as costs have skyrocketed. On top of that, some businesses have started to lay off workers, which feeds into people not really spending money in the shops. So while people here are already struggling with cost increases for their shopping, now their incomes are increasingly hit. Hopes are activity picks up again next year, with economic growth projected at 0.9% for 2024. But even then, Germany will be trailing behind the average of other EU countries and also the global economy.
In terms of energy prices, what role perhaps does that play in all of this, and why is Germany such a special case?
Yeah, so the important thing about the German economy is that it really relies on heavy industry. Think of cars, machines, pharmaceuticals. To make those things, you need a lot of energy. Now, ever since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year, Germany has been struggling to get cheap energy. Just to give you a glimpse, electricity in Germany usually clocks in at around 40 euro cents per kilowatt hour. In the US or France, that's at 4 euro cents. Now that means many heavy industry companies are downsizing operations in Germany, and many of the smaller and medium-sized companies that make up the backbone of the German economy are thinking of leaving altogether. Germany is special in this situation because it relied so heavily on energy shipments out of Russia, which are now cut. In a way, you could say that Germany was competitive in the past decade, really because of cheap Russian gas. And that's just not going to power Germany anymore.
And Markus, now the German government wants to bring its economy back on track, but they seem quite split on how. Will they get out of this?
Sure. The big news came last week when Robert Habeck, economy minister for the Green Party, came out with a plan to safeguard German industry. He has a bunch of ideas on how to keep businesses here and even start new ones. The central tenet of his plan is to subsidize electricity prices for industry at around 6 euro cents per kilowatt hour. Now, Habeck is facing several headwinds to this proposal. First, there are his own ranks from the Green Party. They don't like the idea to support energy from fossil fuels through government coffers. But the end boss in this debate seems to be Germany's finance minister, who just doesn't want to dole out money for this subsidy. He and his party of the Liberals want to stick to Germany's policy of a balanced budget, which has been cited as stifling Germany's infrastructure development and growth many times in the past. So this coalition government is deeply aware of the problems, but seems in gridlock over any action to jolt out of this recession we're facing. Right now, budgets are finalized for the next year, so there is still some wiggle room, but business leaders obviously aren't very happy about any of this. And lastly, there are efforts for the German government to source energy from places previously untapped. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz traveled to Nigeria and Ghana this week and spoke at length about sourcing oil and gas from the region. On the table were possible German investments into gas production in Nigeria, as well as drawing IT experts from Ghana into the German economy, because businesses here say they're lacking skilled workers.
Indeed, Markus, I was just going to mention that, and this, I believe, would have an impact on citizens. But so far, how are Germans coping with these economic challenges?
Yeah, I think this question gets right to the heart of some of the things happening in Germany right now. The good news is that the government had supported citizens through all of this past winter with cash payments and subsidies. Now, energy prices have come down, and for example, pension payments for senior citizens are set to increase beginning of next year. The bleak news is that a lot of these cash buffers seem to be empty now, and neither pension nor wage increases have been keeping pace with inflation. What this means is that there are still many people, especially those in cities and with higher education, who are faring well. But poverty is growing here. To give you an example, food banks are saying they are at the brink of capacity, and some are closing for new clients. What some experts are weary of is that an economic downturn can also mean political radicalization, and we are seeing a stark rise of right-wing extremists in recent elections. So sadly, Germans don't seem to be coping particularly well with these problems, but it's important to note, many get together and help each other out, like people working hard at the food banks.
I can imagine. Markus, thanks very much. Markus Richmond, Deutsche Welle correspondent, joining us there from Berlin. To other stories now, North Korea has said it is closing several diplomatic missions abroad as international sanctions continue to disrupt its ability to finance its offices overseas and other ventures. Closures have already affected Spain, Hong Kong, Angola and Uganda, but experts say Pyongyang may close as many as 10 missions and embassies in total, representing about 20% of its current diplomatic presence. A statement from the Foreign Ministry said the withdrawal is in accordance with changing global environments and national foreign policy, adding that while some embassies would close, others would open. According to Seoul's Ministry of Unification, North Korea has diplomatic ties with more than 150 countries, but has relatively few embassies and consulates. The last time it closed so many of its foreign missions was in the 1990s, when it was facing severe famine. At least 32 people have been killed in a fire that tore through a drug rehabilitation center north of Iran. Authorities say the blaze erupted early on Friday in Langarud, a city in the Caspian Sea province of Gilan, north of Tehran. 16 others have been taken to hospital. Iran imposes a death penalty on repeat drug smugglers and dealers, but runs a series of rehab programs for addicts. An initial investigation showed that a heater was the cause of the fire, which then spread to the rest of the center. The province's deputy governor says the manager and other possible culprits have been arrested. The center accommodated up to 40 people. In the United States, former President Donald Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., has acknowledged in court that he had signed financial documents for the family company that a New York judge has ruled were fraudulent, but sought to pin the blame on others who worked on them. In a second day of testimony, the 45-year-old said he relied on accountants within the Trump organization and outside firm Mazars to ensure that financial estimates of trophy properties and other assets were accurate. Those documents are the heart of a New York civil fraud trial that threatens to hobble the real estate empire that built Trump's reputation as a business mogul before he entered politics. His testimony concluded shortly before lunch when his brother Eric Trump followed him on the witness stand. The two brothers took control of the Trump organization in 2017 when their father assumed the presidency. Following his testimony, Donald Jr. spoke to reporters outside the courthouse.
You know what? I think it went really well if we were actually dealing with logic and reason the way business is conducted. But unfortunately, the Attorney General has brought forth a case that is purely a political persecution. The banks in question made hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, think about this, right? They are not claiming that they are victims. They are not saying that they were misled. They are saying that they did their own due diligence. But that doesn't matter because I guess in the attempt to get Trump, the Attorney General can go ahead and try to, I guess, make more millions for the biggest banking institutions in the world who have already made millions. I mean, I think it's a truly scary precedent for New York. For me, for example, before even having a day in court, I'm apparently guilty of fraud for relying on my accountants to do, wait for it, accounting. I mean, think about that. What does that do for literally any other business? You pay experts millions of dollars to be experts. You sign off on what they give you, and you're liable. And by the way, again, the same supposed victims, because it's a totally victimless thing, are saying, no, we did our own due diligence. We made hundreds of millions of dollars. If this was to become precedent where you could have an overzealous attorney general go after any business in New York, this city would be in even worse shape than it already is today, because everyone would be driven elsewhere. So it's a sad thing, but you know, I guess we're going to see and have to play it out accordingly. Well, I think, you know, I can look at the crime stats in New York and think there's probably other people they could focus on. You know, again, I think that generally speaking, right now in the United States, and we don't have to get too political, and I understand that, I imagine according to most of you guys, I am not the upstanding individual that Hunter Biden is, but, you know, it seems like I've done an undue testimony 50 hours before Congress. All of it ends up being nonsense. We got to believe the Russia hoax for 5 years. Turns out that was all a lie. Turns out members of Congress can edit my emails and change them for a narrative. And, you know, when that's discovered, oh, we'll just move on to the next subject. It's a sad state of affairs. We don't have an equal system of justice in America these days. And I think we're seeing that play out. The good thing is it's so egregious. It's so ridiculous that I think actual, you know, hardworking Americans trying to live their American dream are starting to realize it now. They're starting to realize that they're second-class citizens in their own country, and I think they'll act accordingly in the future. So really appreciate it, guys. I don't know. You know, honestly, like, I don't feel I need to be a part of, you know, the continued circus. It's going to keep going, and, you know, this is not my first rodeo at this point, and I guess there's a good saying about bread and circuses going back to the Roman times, and I feel like we're living a little bit of that right now.
We're still talking allegations of financial crime. Sam Bankman-Fried, who once ran one of the world's biggest cryptocurrency exchanges, has been found guilty of fraud and money laundering at the end of a month-long trial in New York. The jury delivered its verdict after less than 5 hours of deliberations. It concludes a stunning fall from grace for the 31-year-old former billionaire, once known as the king of crypto, who now faces decades in jail. Bankman-Fried was arrested last year after his firm, FTX, went bankrupt. His sentencing has been set for 28th of March next year. U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Damian Williams, says the conviction is major victory.
Sam Bankman-Fried perpetrated one of the biggest financial frauds in American history, a multi-billion-dollar scheme designed to make him the king of crypto. But here's the thing. The cryptocurrency industry might be new. The players like Sam Bankman-Fried might be new. But this kind of fraud, this kind of corruption is as old as time, and we have no patience for it. This case moved at lightning speed. That was not a coincidence, that was a choice. And it's also a message. It's a warning, this case, to every single fraudster out there who thinks that they're untouchable, or that their crimes are too complex for us to catch, or that they're too powerful for us to prosecute, or that they could try to talk their way out of it when they get caught. Those folks should think again and cut it out. And if they don't, I promise we'll have enough handcuffs for all of them.
A former gang member charged in the 1996 murder of hip-hop star Tupac Shakur has pleaded not guilty in a Las Vegas court. 6-year-old Dwayne Kefe Davis, who police said was long suspected in the murder and began implicating himself in a series of public statements from recent years, responded not guilty when asked by Clark County District Judge Tierra Jones if he wanted to enter a plea. Davis was indicted in September by a Clark County grand jury and arrested in Las Vegas for Shakur's drive-by shooting death, a long unsolved crime that became a defining moment in history of rap music. Davis was charged with 1 count of murder with a deadly weapon for his alleged role in leading a group of men to kill Shakur in the drive-by shooting. Shakur, widely regarded as one of rap music's greatest artists, was also one of its most commercially successful, selling more than 75 million records worldwide. Aid group Norwegian Refugee Council, NRC, says up to 10,000 people are crossing into Afghanistan as Pakistan's deadline expires for undocumented foreigners to leave or face expulsion. NRC advocacy manager Becky Robbie said authorities and humanitarian agencies are working 24 hours a day to process what she described as a staggering number of people. Scrambling to cope with the sudden influx, the Taliban-run administration in Afghanistan said temporary transit camps had been set up and food and medical assistance would be provided. But relief agencies report dire conditions across the border. Pakistani authorities began rounding up undocumented foreigners, most of them Afghans, hours before Wednesday's deadline. The government has brushed off calls from the UN rights groups and Western embassies to reconsider its expulsion plan, saying Afghans had been involved in militant attacks and crime that undermine the security of the country.
The situation at the border points at the moment is completely overwhelming. There are a staggering number of people coming across the border each day. We're seeing somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 people between both border points crossing on a daily basis. And when people reach the border point, normally they have been traveling already for several days. They've been sleeping out in the open. In many cases, they've had to sell their personal belongings to pay for the transport. They've often left in a very hurried circumstance. 10,000 people a day, just for the authorities to register that number of people is an enormous task. When I was at Torkham border just a few days ago, I saw directly the queues for registration going out the door. It's enormous, and the authorities, together with other UN agencies, are working 24 hours a day to process all of these people.
Welcome back, and we're in India, where the toxic air quality there is affecting players at the Cricket World Cup. Toxic haze blanketed New Delhi this week, raising fears of another public health emergency in the Indian capital, as government agencies warn that pollution levels could worsen over the next few days despite efforts to reduce them. Air Quality Index AQI stood at 415 on a scale of 500 in the capital's Anand Vihar area on Thursday, November the 2nd, indicating severe levels of pollution that can affect healthy people and those with existing ailments. The AQI between 0 and 50 is considered healthy. The worsening air quality has cast a shadow over the Cricket World Cup as fans flock to stadiums across Indian cities.
I mean, in an ideal world, you don't want a situation like this, but I'm pretty sure the concerned people are taking the necessary steps to avoid these kind of situation. It's not ideal, everyone knows that. But obviously, looking at our future generation, your kids, my kid, obviously it's quite important that they get to live without any fear. So yeah, I mean, every time I get to speak outside of cricket, if we are not discussing cricket, I always talk about this, that, we have to look after our future generation.
I've actually got exercise-induced asthma, so, sometimes going from, I get it when it's cold, so obviously it doesn't happen here that often, but sometimes it happens when you go to a new city in India, where the air is slightly different. So yeah, that could be a reason for it. Bangalore, when we actually turned up, just felt a lot fresher. But doing the running that I was doing does bring it on a lot easier than normal.
Well, staying with the weather, large areas of Tuscany have been hit by flooding, leaving 3 people dead, 6 others missing as heavy winds and rain buffeted central Italy. Cars were swept away. The water levels were rising on the river Arno due to burst its banks later today. Hospitals were flooded. People were trapped in their cars and underpasses and rescued from their homes with rubber dinghies. Storm Kiran was causing has caused more than 10 deaths across Western Europe. Meanwhile, in Spain, firefighters from the military emergency units are battling a wildfire in the eastern Valencia region after the inferno broke out and spread quickly overnight amid strong winds. Authorities have evacuated at least 800 people around the coastal town of Gandia as the region and a large swath of the eastern portion of the Iberian Peninsula was on high alert for strong winds for the second day in a row as Storm Kiran smashed into Western Europe. Around 2,500 residents in Portuguese and Ado villages were asked to stay at home as the winds blew smoke towards their homes. Authorities have evacuated at least 1,000 and 1,400 hectares could be affected by flames. Elon Musk and Rishi Sunak have agreed on the possible need for what they call physical off switches to prevent robots from running out of control in a dangerous way, making reference to film franchise The Terminator and other science fiction films. At the first AI Safety Summit in London, the tech billionaire told British Prime Minister that he thinks AI is the most disruptive force in history, speculating the technology would be able to do everything and make employment as we know it today a thing of the past. The 50-minute interview included a prediction by Mr. Musk that the tech will make paid work redundant. He also warned of humanoid robots that can chase you anywhere. The pair talked about how London was a leading hub for the AI industry and how the technology could transform learning.
But if you have a local sort of off switch where you perhaps say a keyword or something and then that puts the robot into a safe state, some kind of localized safe state ability. Well, I think we are seeing the most disruptive force in history here. Where we have for the first time, we will have for the first time something that is smarter than the smartest human. And that, I mean, it's hard to say exactly what that moment is, but there will come a point where no job is needed. You can have a job if you want to have a job for sort of personal satisfaction, but the AI will be able to do everything. So I don't know if that makes people comfortable or uncomfortable. That's why I say if you wish for a magic genie, so it's both good and bad. And do that en masse. And practically the only way we'll be able to tell is that the grammar is too good.
We head to Johannesburg, South Africa, where the 20th Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, has kicked off. South Africa's Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition is hosting a delegation of African trade ministers. Take a look.
The theme of this year's gathering is partnering to build a resilient, sustainable and inclusive AGOA to support economic development, industrialization and quality job creation. As a flagship program under the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, the event seeks to promote trade and economic cooperation between the United States and the African nations. South Africa's Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Mr. Ibrahim Patel, is playing host to a distinguished delegation of African trade ministers.
And so as our US friends look to the African continent, we want them to see this as a major place of procurement, not just from one country, but across the continent.
During the opening ceremony, the Commissioner for Trade and Industry of the African Union Commission, Mr. Albert Mochanga, stressed the importance of African nations maximizing the benefits offered by AGOA for structural transformation.
One of the key issues will be for you to consider the recommendations from the senior officials. So I'll be back when you go into that document.
Head of Trade for Business and Commercial Banking, Standard Bank Group, Philip Mayberg, says Africa should seize every trade opportunity.
I think it's always good for African economies to look at all options in terms of trade opportunities, but it doesn't have to come at the cost of another one. The opportunity that we have as an African continent is we've got the opportunity to look at trade opportunities both towards the east, towards the west, and also importantly within the continent. I think AGOA forms an important part of that landscape.
Made in Africa Business Expo forms a part of 2023 AGOA Forum. It is here where I caught up with some Nigerian entrepreneurs.
Okay, well, all the way from Oka, Anambra State, Nigeria, I wish and I pray, and I know it's achievable, to get a bit of tax-free, to get our products on all the shelves, Walmart, all the shops in America, even in South Africa, like ShopRite and all that. So that's what I'm praying to achieve.
In this program, I hope to have connections and have possibly more customers that may need my products that I can send to them. In fact, I want to send to America, not only America, all over the world.
Exhibitors have gathered here with a common goal: to access the US market, subsequently create long-lasting partnerships. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Simos, Channels Television News.
And Nigeria has submitted a first-of-its-kind Pigeon language film, Mami Wata, hoping it will be entered for a foreign language Oscar after picking up several awards, including at this year's Sundance Film Festival. Mami Wata, which was shot entirely in black and white, is an exploration and creative reimagination of the mythology of a titular mermaid deity of West African folklore.
Mami Wata give Mama a pissing.
It's not the first time Nigeria will be rubbing shoulders with the greats of the Oscars. In 2019, the Nigeria Official Selection Committee submitted Genevieve Naji's Lionheart, and in 2020, Desmond Begeli's The Milkmaid. Neither of them made it through to the official nomination for the Academy Awards, but the NOSC is not deterred.
It's a special thing to be in the conversation of world cinema alongside other countries. Even if we don't win, that's not the point. The point is, let us rally around the selection and let us be part of the conversation every single year.
Filmmakers and actors gathered at this year's Africa Movies Academy Awards in Lagos and shared their thoughts on African cinema.
I don't think we should wait for the Oscars to validate what we do. We just have to continue doing what we do. If we just do it for ourselves, it's fine enough. Let's not forget that we're 1.4 billion Africans in Africa. That's a lot of people. We don't need the validation of anybody else. You know what I mean? So it's great if they want to include us, but at the same time, it shouldn't be the goal.
In 2020, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences announced it would allow films that are primarily in Pigeon English to be eligible for submission. The announcement will open doors for more African films to make it to the Academy Awards for consideration. Mami Water, for one, promises to make it through that newly opened door.
I'm just hoping that this will do it for us, and especially in our own unique Pigeon English language. That's a language that unites us all as Nigerians. It's not Yoruba, it's not Igbo, it's not Hausa, it's not any of the other languages. Pigeon is peculiar to all of us, and so if it makes it, we all make it.
Since the creation of the Best Foreign Language Film category, only 3 African films have won the Oscars so far. The South African production, Sosi, which won in 2006, was the only non-French language film that has made it from Africa. The Nigeria Official Selection Committee was formed in 2013.
And finally on the program, dogs are driving to school in style on their very own bus in the city of Florianopolis, southern Brazil. The dog bus was created by Andre Bresson, a dog trainer and owner of the Dog Training Center, Daycare and Hotel. Pups are secured to the seats with their leashes instead of traditional seat belts, which allows them to travel comfortably but safely. Dogs enjoy the rides. Bresson usually picks them up and brings them back right after daycare. How sweet. Well, that's our program this Friday. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker. Bye for now.